Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to NK Cheating Story. We truly appreciate every single one of you. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. My name's Ethan Monroe. For 12 years, I thought I had the perfect life, a loving wife, 2 beautiful daughters, and a quiet home built on trust. But the thing about silence is, it hides cracks you can't see until it's too late. One late-night phone call, a pair of black lace panties, and a name I'd never heard before unraveled everything. What followed wasn't just heartbreak, it was war. And I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I disappeared, right after exposing my cheating wife in front of everyone. You want to know how I did it? Sit tight. This gets wild. We were childhood sweethearts, the kind of couple people envied, or at least thought they should. We met when we were 10, started dating in high school, and never looked back. While our classmates went off to college, I took a job at Desmond Engineering straight out of high school, drafting blueprints by day, dreaming of a better life by night. A year later, we got married. The year after that, Laura gave birth to our twin girls, Lily and Grace. They became my entire world. Life was simple then. Tight, but good. We couldn't afford much, but I didn't care. I had everything that mattered. As the years passed, I climbed a few rungs at work, and our financial situation improved. We bought a modest 3-bedroom house and 2 used, reliable cars. Nothing flashy, but we earned it, every square foot, every mile. Laura stayed home. It was her dream to be a full-time mother and homemaker, and I respected that. I worked long hours so she didn't have to. I came home exhausted, but I was always there, present, committed, trying. Physically, not much changed. Laura was still beautiful. Dark brown hair with soft bangs, standing just over 5 feet tall. She used to remind me of a younger Marie Osmond, smile like sunshine, voice like velvet. As for me, I still carried the build from my high school football days. Right tackle, broad shoulders, strong hands. A man who could fix a leaking pipe and still rock his daughters to sleep. A year ago, a man named Marcus Reed moved into town. We'd known each other from the football field back in high school. Rivals then, friends now. He got a job at the same firm as me, and we hit it off right away. He was married, too, to a striking redhead named Dana. They didn't have kids, but that made them the ideal couple to help out with ours when Laura and I needed time. The 4 of us became close. Dinners, weekends, birthday parties, movie nights. Dana and Laura bonded instantly. They were inseparable, shopping, clubs, book meetings, even fitness classes. It felt good, having another couple to trust. But that trust, like most illusions, was fragile. About 6 months ago, things began to shift. At first, it was subtle. Laura started attending more PDA meetings. They used to be once a month, but now she claimed they happened weekly. Her phone was glued to her hand, even when she didn't think I noticed. And Dana, who didn't have kids, was always with her, claiming to be helping with school events. Then came the lingerie. Boxes of new lace sets. Expensive ones. Black, red, silk, satin. They piled up in her drawers like gifts for someone I didn't recognize anymore. I didn't say a word at first. Maybe it was for me, I told myself. Maybe she was planning something romantic. But weeks passed, then months, and none of it ever made an appearance in our bedroom. What really got me, though, was the smell. One night, after I'd put the girls to bed, Laura came home from a basket party. She smiled like everything was normal, kissed me on the cheek, and headed straight for the shower. I found it strange. She'd taken one before leaving too. A double shower evening? That wasn't like her. Curiosity got the better of me. While she bathed, I checked the basket she brought home. Nothing inside, except a pair of damp, black lace panties. Wet, sticky, and not from sweat. I'm not the kind of man who snoops. Never had to be. But that night, I reached into my wife's purse for the first time in 12 years. I wasn't looking for lipstick or receipts. Just answers. Her phone was a goldmine. She hadn't even tried to hide it. Dozens of calls labeled DW, DH, DC. I didn't recognize the numbers, but the pattern was too neat to ignore. D for Dana, maybe? Or something more coded? Her contacts were organized by location. Dana home, Dana cell, Dana work. One extension number matched across all 3. Kevin Daniels, an engineer at Gilbert, where Dana worked. Suddenly, everything made sense. The late-night calls, the weekly meetings, the new lingerie, the second shower. Dana was the bridge. Kevin was the destination. But I didn't confront her. Not yet, because something deep in me had already shifted. The pain? It was there. But beneath it, there was a quiet fire. A resolve I hadn't felt in years. I realized I'd spent over a decade being the loyal, dependable husband. The guy who always forgave, always provided. But now I was going to be the man she never saw coming. And this time, I wasn't going to raise my voice. I was going to raise hell. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the images came flooding back. Laura's fake smile, the new lingerie, that sticky piece of fabric still sitting in my pocket like a ticking bomb. My mind kept racing, replaying every odd moment over the past 6 months. The PDA lies, the book clubs that never actually read, the increasing phone calls to unknown contacts. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a slow, creeping certainty that I'd been played for a fool. By sunrise, I had already made a decision. I wasn't going to be the clueless husband any longer. Laura greeted me in the kitchen, acting like everything was normal. She wore her favorite robe and poured herself a cup of coffee, humming as if the night before hadn't happened. The twins were already off to school, so it was just the two of us. "You should hurry up or you'll be late," she said sweetly, not making eye contact. "I'm not going to work today," I replied, calmly sipping from my mug. She looked up, slightly puzzled. "Why not?" "Too many personal problems," I said, watching her face for a reaction. Her smile faltered for a second, just enough for me to notice. I sat across from her at the kitchen table, the silence between us as sharp as broken glass. She tried to keep things light, but I wasn't here to dance around the truth anymore. "I want to talk," I said flatly. "About your little novel." She blinked. "What novel?" I leaned in slightly. "The one where I'm the faithful husband, and you're the bored wife sneaking off for margaritas with Dana every Tuesday night." She tensed but tried to recover. "Ethan, what is this about? You tell me." Her eyes darted. She took a slow sip of her coffee, like she was buying time. Then, with a rehearsed sigh, she leaned back in her chair. "If you're asking if I'm cheating on you, the answer is no." I tilted my head. "Funny, I never asked that question. But thanks for confirming what I already suspected." She gave me a nervous laugh. "Seriously? This is what you've been thinking? After everything we've built together?" I didn't flinch. "I've been thinking about a lot of things lately. Like why the PDA says you haven't been to a meeting in over 6 months, even though you go every Tuesday." Her expression hardened. "And how Dana, who doesn't even have kids, is somehow also attending these PDA meetings." She sat up straighter, her voice rising. "We go to Rosie's Cantina. Ladies' night. We didn't tell you because we didn't want any drama with you and Marcus." "Oh, I'm sure Dana's good at keeping secrets. Especially about men who work with her. Like Kevin Daniels." That name landed like a hammer. Laura froze. Her coffee cup trembled in her hand. "He's just a friend." I nodded slowly, pulling the phone from my pocket and placing it gently on the table. "Right. A friend you called over 30 times last week." She opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. "Don't lie to me, Laura. Not today. I found the underwear. I know they weren't for me, and I know what was on them." She paled. The color drained from her face, and the confident housewife routine crumbled. "You're making this into something it's not. Do not insult me again," I snapped, the first hint of real anger in my voice. "Do not pretend you didn't sleep with him." Her voice cracked. "It only happened once. Last night. I swear it didn't mean anything." I let out a bitter laugh and stood, pacing the room. "Oh, I'm sure that makes it better. One night, one betrayal, one wrecking ball through our entire marriage." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. I'd seen enough. She tried to come closer, but I stepped back. "You broke us, Laura. You chose this, and now you don't get to cry your way out of it." Then, her phone rang. We both stared at it. The screen lit up with a name, Kevin. I picked it up and hit the speaker button. "Laura." Kevin's voice was hesitant. "Are you okay? I tried calling your work line, but..." "She's busy," I replied calmly. "And she won't be calling you back." There was silence on the other end. "Who is this?" "I'm the husband," I said. "You remember him, right? The guy whose life you just blew up." More silence. Then I smiled coldly. "Don't worry. I'll be seeing you this afternoon. Keep emergency services on speed dial." I ended the call and slid the phone back across the table. Laura stood there, her robe clutched around her like armor. Her eyes were wide, terrified. "I'm leaving," I said, grabbing my keys. "I'll be gone before you get back. Whatever you want to do next, do it without me." She didn't speak. didn't follow me to the door, but I could feel her world crumbling behind me. And I hadn't even started yet. I didn't have a plan. Not yet. Just 1,000 emotions boiling in my chest, and nowhere safe to put them. Anger, betrayal, humiliation, but above all, a sharp clarity I hadn't felt in years. I drove without thinking, just needing distance. Every red light seemed like an eternity. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I wasn't even sure where I was headed until I found myself pulling into the parking lot at work. It was still early, too early for most people, but I needed to see Marcus. He was the only person I could trust, or so I thought. When I walked into the office, his desk was empty. Figures. He probably had a surveying job scheduled, out at some site measuring land while his own life was quietly sinking beneath his feet. I grabbed my phone and called him. He picked up on the second ring. "Yo, Ethan. Everything okay?" His voice was casual, too casual. "No, man. Not even close. I need to talk to you, privately. It's about Laura and Dana." There was a pause. "What about them?" "I think they've both been lying to us. And not just about book clubs and shopping trips. It's bigger. They've been seeing other guys, Kevin Daniels and someone named Calvin Bostic." Another pause, longer this time. Then, a low, disbelieving laugh. "What are you talking about?" I launched into it all. The late-night calls, the lies about PDA meetings, the affair with Kevin, the lingerie, the confession. His silence grew heavier with every word. "Dana knows Kevin," I finished. "She works with him. That's how Laura met him. She didn't just cheat on me, Marcus. She had help." "Jesus Christ," he muttered. I don't know what to say." "Calvin Bostic? I know that guy. We graduated together." "Yeah, well, apparently he's more than just an old classmate to Dana." I told him to talk to Dana. Ask her directly. I warned him that Laura would probably call her soon to spin some version of damage control. He swore he'd handle it. When I hung up, I felt a bitter sense of validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. Laura really had betrayed me. And she wasn't alone. Back home, I found myself pacing, unable to think straight. I didn't want to be in that house any longer than necessary. Every corner of it reeked of her deception. But I had to prepare for what came next, whatever that was. I pulled out her phone again. Another incoming call. This time, it was Dana. Perfect. I answered it, disguising my voice just enough. "Hey, it's me." "Oh, Laura," Dana said with relief. "I was just about to call again. Marcus knows. Ethan must have said something. He's going crazy. I'm taking you home. Are you packed yet?" I swallowed the bitterness and kept my voice calm. "Almost done. You need to lay low," she warned. "Don't talk to Ethan. He's not thinking straight." I wanted to laugh. Of course I wasn't thinking straight. I'd just had the foundation of my entire life ripped out from under me. But I ended the call politely. Then I canceled our one shared credit card. Changed the PIN on our debit account. Left the checking untouched. For now, I still needed to pay bills. I hoped Laura hadn't grabbed any receipts. I was about to sit down when my own phone rang again. This time, it was Marcus. "You're not going to believe this," he said. I went to Dana's office. Calvin showed up, and I lost it. "You didn't." "I did. Right there in the parking lot. Caught him trying to run to his BMW. Slammed him onto the hood and punched the smug off his face. Security got involved. They had to use a stun gun to pull me off. I'm in jail, man." I closed my eyes. "Damn it, Marcus." Yeah, I know. But listen, he's pressing charges. I need you to call my brother, ask him to bail me out. And tell Ethan thanks. If you hadn't warned me, I'd still be clueless." I hung up, made the call, and headed out. On a whim, I stopped by Gilbert Engineering, the place where Kevin worked. The receptionist didn't even blink when I asked for his office. She pointed down a hall. His desk was empty. Cleared out. I asked around, and one of the drafters told me Kevin had quit that morning. No notice, no goodbye. Just vanished. Coward. I walked past Dana's desk. Still cluttered. She hadn't left. Not yet. But Kevin? He ran. Back at his place, small rental, barely lived in. I found the white Lexus in the driveway with the trunk open. I didn't knock. I walked in. He saw me and bolted out the back door like a rat. I should have chased him, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring at the half-packed suitcases, the open drawer with his passport, a laptop, and his phone. I grabbed them all. No, I didn't break in. The door was open. He left it like everything else in his life, wide open and half-finished. And before I left, I let the air out of one of his tires. Petty? Maybe. But sometimes, justice starts small. I didn't sleep that night either. The house was too quiet, too clean, too fake. Everything around me suddenly felt like it had been staged, part of some glossy sitcom I'd been tricked into starring in. Except I wasn't the lead. Hell, I wasn't even in control of my own script. The laptop I'd taken from Kevin sat in front of me, along with his phone and a folder of personal documents. I hadn't planned on becoming some sort of amateur investigator, but desperation has a way of sharpening your instincts. I opened the laptop, cracked his password on the third try, Windmill21, and began going through everything. Emails, photos, conversations. Nothing graphic, but emotional, intimate. Absolutely. Pictures of Laura and Kevin smiling at some outdoor cafe, holding hands in the parking lot of a restaurant, sharing drinks at a bar I'd never even heard of. It wasn't the physical betrayal that gutted me. It was the way she looked at him. The same look she used to give me, before the silence crept in. One email thread stood out. Kevin had been offered a job, an engineering position for a renewable energy project in Spain. Start date, 6 weeks out. And Laura? She was planning to go with him. The worst part? She was taking the girls. I found an unsent draft written from Laura's email to her lawyer. It outlined a plan to file for full custody, claiming I was emotionally unstable and not equipped for fatherhood. She even had a note to herself. Document Ethan's temper. Set up counseling. Maybe fake incident. Get doctor's note. I leaned back in my chair, the bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just cheating. It was a full-blown operation, a coordinated takedown of the man who'd done nothing but love and provide. She was going to destroy me to make herself look like the hero. And she almost pulled it off. The next morning, Mom made coffee like she always did when she stayed over to help with the girls. The twins sat quietly at the kitchen table, eating cereal and talking about their upcoming science fair. For a moment, I just stood there, watching them. Those two innocent faces that had no idea the world they knew was about to shift. I walked over, ruffled their hair, and said gently, "Hey girls, listen. I need to talk to you about something important." They both looked up, wide-eyed. "Your mom and we're going to take a little break from each other. You'll stay here with Grandma for a while, and I'll be with you, of course. Your mom, she needs some time to figure some things out." Bethany squinted at me, then looked at her sister. Grace didn't say a word, just gave a small nod. Then Bethany, bold as ever, asked, "Is this because she's cheating?" I blinked. "What?" She shrugged. "Britt and I kind of figured it out. We weren't sure, but she started acting weird months ago. She wouldn't let us come with her to the mall anymore, said it was grown-up shopping time. But then someone at school showed us a photo of her with another guy in Nobles Grove." My stomach twisted. "Why didn't you tell me?" Beth sighed. "We weren't sure how. And we thought maybe you already knew." The hurt in their voices cut deeper than anything Laura had done. My own daughters had seen this unraveling before I did. I was the last to know. The father, the husband, the fool. That night, after dinner, I powered up Kevin's laptop again. While scrolling through more emails, a message popped up on his phone. It was from Sarah, Dana's friend and co-conspirator. "Dear Ken, sorry for the love. Janet." She tried to send a coded message, poorly. She thought she was being clever, but I saw right through it. So I responded from his phone. "TAJ. Let her chew on that." I printed off everything I found. Emails, photos, travel plans, job offer letters, even the draft of Laura's custody manipulation. The salt in the wound? She'd been plotting all this while I was buying groceries, folding laundry, paying for her pedicures. I sat back, exhausted, emotionally gutted, but strangely focused. If this was war, then I was no longer the naive man stumbling through it. The girls poked their heads in later, asking if they could call their mom. I said yes. They deserved answers, even if I didn't. Mom stood nearby while they talked. It didn't last long, less than 5 minutes. From what Mom told me later, they didn't sugarcoat a thing. They were angry, hurt, but clear. They didn't want to go to Spain. They didn't want a new dad. They just wanted peace. After they went to bed, I sat outside on the porch with a beer in hand, staring out at the night sky. The stars looked different now. Distant. Cold. Maybe they'd always been that way, and I'd just been too wrapped up in my delusions to notice. The woman I married, the girl I once thought I'd grow old with, was gone. She'd traded trust for fantasy, a family for a thrill, and now, it was my turn to finish what she started. Only this time, I would be the one in control. The next morning, I found an envelope in the mailbox. It wasn't addressed to me. It was for Laura. Thick, official, and marked with the seal of the U.S. State Department. I knew I shouldn't open it. But after everything I'd uncovered, my patience had long since eroded. I slid my finger under the flap, pulled the contents out, and felt my stomach twist. It was a passport. Not just hers, but a family passport. Laura and the girls. The photo showed her smiling with Lily and Grace, one arm around each of them. She'd actually taken them to get pictures done without saying a word. I remembered vaguely when they mentioned going to the mall with her one weekend, but I never imagined it was for that. And of course, my name wasn't anywhere in the envelope. That confirmed it. She was planning to vanish. Take my daughters. Move to Spain with Kevin Daniels. Start over without me, as if I never existed. I gripped the envelope tight, trembling with rage. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was theft. Of my children. Of my rights. Of everything I had spent 12 years building. I called her father, Charles. I didn't care if he was part of the cover-up or not. He needed to know what his daughter was planning. Charles, I said, tell Laura the passport's here. If she wants it, she can send Kevin to get it. There was silence on the other end. Then a long sigh. I didn't know, Ethan. I swear. She told us it was for a family vacation. Just a trip. I had no idea she was planning to take them. You believe her? I asked. Even after everything? He didn't answer right away. We've asked her to move out. We don't know where she's staying now. I think she's staying with her sister. Good, I said. Because she's not coming back here. That night, while I was making dinner with Mom, the girls told me a woman from Family Services had visited their school. Her name was Jody Mitchell. They said she was kind, friendly, asked them about home life, about their mom and me. The visit shook me more than I wanted to admit. Laura had already made a move. She wasn't just thinking about taking the girls. She was laying the legal groundwork to strip me of custody altogether. I drove straight to the Family Services office first thing the next morning and asked to speak with Jody. To my surprise, she remembered me. Back in high school, she had been part of the goth crowd. Black lipstick, fishnet gloves, always with a book in hand. We barely spoke back then. But now, sitting across from her, I saw a woman who looked nothing like the girl from our teenage years. Professional, poised, but still sharp. John, Ethan Monroe, she said, reading my file. 2 daughters, Lily and Grace. No prior complaints. No investigations. I nodded. And yet, I think my wife is trying to build a case against me. Fabricate one. To take them. She tilted her head. Do you have any reason to believe that? I pulled out the printed email from Kevin's laptop. The one where Laura mentioned declaring me unfit and using counseling records to revoke visitation. This isn't speculation, I said. She's got it mapped out. She's going to Spain. She filed for a family passport. I have it. Jody scanned the page, her expression hardening. Where did you get this? She asked. I found it on Kevin Daniels' laptop, I admitted. He left it behind when he ran. She leaned back. Technically, it's not admissible, but this is serious. If this is real, and she's preparing a custody challenge based on false claims, we need to act now. I don't have a lawyer, I said. I can't afford one. She gave me a long look. I'll help where I can. But you need to be prepared. If she pushes, this will get ugly. I nodded. It already is. Later that day, I called Carla, Laura's sister. She wanted to meet. Claimed she had information. I was skeptical, but I agreed. We met at a McDonald's on the edge of town. She looked tired, nervous, guilty. She's not well, Carla said. Laura, she's desperate. She thinks going to Spain will give her a fresh start. With my kids. I snapped. Without telling me. She thinks you'll block her. That you'll never agree. She's damn right, I said. I won't let her disappear with them. I won't lose them to some fantasy. She was going to try and declare you unstable, Carla admitted. Said you might have a breakdown. Thought she could use that to get full custody. And you were going to help her? She shook her head. Not anymore. I told her she was out of her mind. But I need to ask, do you still have the passport? I stared at her for a long moment. You tell Laura something for me. There's no way in hell she's taking my daughters out of this country. And if she thinks this ends with me handing her what she wants, she's more delusional than I thought. I stood, walked out, and didn't look back. The next step was mine, and I was done playing nice. When I walked back into the Family Services office the next morning, Jody was already there, standing by the front desk with a coffee in one hand and a file folder in the other. You couldn't stay away, huh? She said with a small smile. I didn't sleep much, I replied. She led me into her office, closed the door behind us, and sat down across from me. I have something for you, she said. I started the process this morning. We're filing a temporary restraining order against Laura. That hit me like a gust of cold wind. It won't stop her from seeing the girls, Jody clarified, but it will legally prevent her from taking them out of the state or denying you access. We'll get it served to her before noon. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a moment, exhaling. Thank you. Jody nodded, tapping her pen on the desk. It's not everything, but it's a start. And right now, it may be the only thing standing between you and losing them. I walked out of her office feeling both relieved and overwhelmed. My mind spun with all the ways Laura might still try to twist things. I needed to be ready for anything. When I got home, Billy was there. He'd been staying with us since the day he lost it and beat Calvin in the parking lot. He looked rough, beard untrimmed, eyes sunken, but he had that same fire in him I saw in my own mirror. Sarah moved back in with her parents, he said, sipping his coffee at the kitchen table. I stopped by to grab some of my stuff. Didn't say a word to her. You planning on staying here for a while? I asked. Until I figure out what's next. I've got some money saved. I want to start my own surveying business. Thought maybe you'd want in. I blinked. You serious? Yeah. You're good with drawings and numbers. I'm good with dirt and tape measures. You've got nothing holding you back now. Nothing but the emotional wreckage of a marriage that was still legally intact. I'll think about it, I said. Right now, I've got to make sure my girls don't get dragged into whatever Laura tries next. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Cameron, Laura's father. She's not doing well, he said, voice low and tired. She's crying all the time. Carla thinks maybe we can all meet, try to find some middle ground. Middle ground. I nearly laughed. After she tried to frame me as unstable? After she forged a passport to take my daughters across the ocean? I'm not asking you to forgive her, Ethan. I just want you to come. Hear what she has to say. I agreed. Not for Laura's sake. For closure. That night, I walked into the Reed's family home with a folder in hand. Inside were printed emails, screenshots of text messages, a photo of the passport, and a copy of the restraining order. If they were going to talk, I was going to show. Laura sat on the couch between Carla and her father. Her eyes were red, her hands fidgeting in her lap. She looked like a shell of the woman I once loved. Cameron opened the conversation. Janet, sorry, Laura, believes you overreacted. She said you pressured her into saying things that weren't true. I said nothing. Just slowly pulled out the photo of her and Kevin, holding hands at a restaurant, one she claimed to never have been to. Then I pulled out the email. Carla read it silently, her mouth tightening with each line. You sent this, I said, voice steady. You talked about making me look like a danger to the kids. You wrote this while I was still kissing you goodnight. Laura covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. Cameron shook his head, ashamed. Why didn't you just tell us the truth, Laura? There was no answer. I added one more document to the pile. This is a restraining order. You can't take the girls anywhere without violating it. So if you were planning a final escape to Spain. I'm not going, she whispered. I told Kevin. I'm staying. I don't care, I replied. You can go, you can stay, you can live on the damn moon. But you are not taking my daughters with you. Not now, not ever. Carla tried to speak, but I held up a hand. We're done here. I turned and walked out, not bothering to say goodbye. For once, I didn't feel the need to fix anything. I had spent 12 years trying to be the calm, reasonable husband, the glue that held everything together. Now, I was done being glue. I was done being quiet. And Laura, well, she was finally out of lies. The morning after that family meeting, I found a familiar envelope waiting on the kitchen counter. It wasn't mine, it was Laura's. But this time, it hadn't come from the government or a lawyer. No, this was personal. A postcard. From Spain. A photograph of a windmill stretched across the front. The message scribbled on the back was short. Thinking of the girls. Tell them I'll call soon. Laura. I stared at the card for a full minute, then turned it over again. Windmills. The same damn symbol she and Kevin used in his email passwords. The same imagery she clung to in her dreams of escape. It was like she was still trying to prove something, or taunt me. Too late. Laura didn't know it yet, but she'd already lost. And not because I exposed her. Not because I kept the passport. Not even because the courts were leaning in my favor. No, she lost the moment she underestimated me. The moment she looked at her daughters and saw them as luggage instead of people. The moment she saw me as weak enough to walk over. By the time I finished reading the card, I was already past caring. I dropped it in the trash and walked away. That afternoon, I met with the lawyer I hired. A no-nonsense guy named Clark. I'd paid him cash up front weeks earlier to avoid delays, and now the final papers were ready. I told him I wasn't going to fight over the house. Let her have it, if she even wanted it. The value had tanked anyway. My only priority was the girls. Joint custody, or full custody if she left the country. No alimony. Child support, yes, but only if she stayed involved. I want this clean, I told him. I don't care about furniture or cars. Just make it so she can't drag my kids into her fantasy. He nodded, flipping through the documents. We'll file first thing Monday. Once she's served, she'll have 30 days to respond. And if she doesn't, she forfeits. Perfect. As I left his office, I got a call from Billy. He sounded out of breath, half amused, half shocked. You're not gonna believe this, he said. Calvin's wife showed up at the hospital. What? Yep. Calvin's still got a busted nose from when I rearranged his face in the parking lot. But while he was recovering, his real wife showed up. With their kids. You're kidding. Nope. And she found Sarah there, feeding him soup like a loyal girlfriend. Security had to separate them. Sarah's back, living with her parents now. Calvin's probably wishing he'd never looked at another woman. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. Billy had taken a week off from work and moved his stuff into my place. Between my mom, the twins, and now Billy crashing on the couch, the house felt crowded, but alive. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like I was suffocating in my own silence. Later that evening, while the girls were doing homework, Jody stopped by. She'd been coming over more often lately, not for work, but for us. At first, she said it was to check in on Lily and Grace. But I could see it in her eyes. It was more than that. She sat on the porch with me, her knees tucked under her sweater, a glass of red wine in her hand. I served Laura the papers, she said after a long pause. How'd she take it? She cried, Jody said. Not in the I'm devastated way. More like someone who finally got caught lying and didn't know how to spin her way out of it. She's staying with Carla still? For now, Jody replied. But something tells me she won't be there long. I don't care where she goes, I muttered. As long as it's far away and doesn't involve my girls. Jody looked at me then, really looked. You know, I didn't come by tonight just to talk about legal stuff. No, she smiled, sipping her wine. I like sitting here with you. I like the quiet. I like you. That caught me off guard. After everything, Laura, the lies, the damage, I hadn't thought about moving forward. Hell, I barely felt like a whole person most days. But Jody made things feel real. Grounded. She didn't see me as broken. She saw me as rebuilding. And for the first time, I didn't flinch at the idea of letting someone in. That night, after the girls went to bed, Jody stayed a little longer. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Just sitting there, shoulder to shoulder, was enough. She kissed me goodnight before leaving, a quiet promise written on her lips. And when she was gone, I looked around the house. The same walls, same rooms, same air, and it didn't feel like a monument to failure anymore. It felt like mine again. My home. My daughters. My life. Laura had tried to burn it all down. But she forgot something crucial. I don't break. I rebuild. And now, I was almost whole. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday afternoon. No courtroom drama, no fireworks. Just a quiet notification from Clark. It's done. 12 years of marriage, signed away with a pen and a couple of legal stamps. I should have felt anger. Or sadness. But instead, what I felt was peace. Not the kind you get from winning. The kind that comes after surviving. Jody and I celebrated that night. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet dinner at Red Lobster while the twins stayed with my mom. She toasted with a smile and said, "To new beginnings." I raised my glass, smiled back, and for once meant it. Life didn't magically get easier after that. But it got real. And I was done pretending. Billy moved out 2 weeks later, found himself a small place on the other side of town. He started that surveying business he'd been talking about and offered me a spot. At first, I hesitated. I still had some leftover bitterness, some fear of shaking up the fragile routine I'd built with the girls. But then my mom did something unexpected. She sat me down at the kitchen table one night, slid a check across the table, and said, "Your father would have wanted you to use this to build something." It was his remaining retirement savings. Money she could have used for herself, but instead, she invested it in me. So I said yes. Billy and I launched Monroe and Reed Surveyors a month later. Small clients at first, local businesses, homeowners needing land plotted. But it was honest work. And I loved it. Drawing again, building again, creating with purpose. 3 months after the divorce, Laura finally left the country. She sent the girls a postcard from Spain. Another windmill. No return address. Just a note. Thinking of you. I'll call on your birthdays. Love, Mom. They were polite about it. Said, thank you, and tucked the card into a drawer. But they didn't ask when she'd be back. They didn't cry. And when her next birthday call never came, they didn't seem surprised. The girls were changing, growing stronger. Sharper. Less trusting, maybe, but more grounded. They still talked to their grandma and grandpa, who visited often, always bringing snacks and hugs. But they never asked about Laura anymore. As for me, I changed too. Jody never pushed. She showed up when she could, called when she couldn't. She gave me space to be a father first, a man second. And when the time came, she stepped into both roles with grace. The girls adored her. They joked she was the cool parent, tattoos, dark nail polish, a closet full of band t-shirts. But beneath the sarcasm, I saw what they really meant. She showed up. She listened. She stayed. The day she moved in, Lily asked if Jody was going to be their stepmom. Jody knelt beside her and said, only if you want me to be. Lily smiled. Grace rolled her eyes, but hugged her anyway. A year later, Jody and I got married. Quiet ceremony. Just family. The twins walked us down the aisle. My mom cried more than anyone. And when we danced to the soft tune of Already Gone by the Eagles, I couldn't help but laugh. That same song Laura once quoted at me like a farewell? It had become a victory anthem. Because I was already gone. Gone from that toxic marriage. Gone from the version of me that let silence eat away at truth. Gone from being a man who waited for things to fix themselves. But I was also home. Home in a life I rebuilt from ashes. Home with 2 daughters who never gave up on me. Home with a woman who didn't just love me, but chose me. Even now, we still get the occasional postcard from Laura. Still with windmills. Still vague. Sometimes I wonder if she sends them more for her own conscience than for the girls. Maybe she's still chasing something she'll never find. Me? I stopped chasing. Because sometimes, peace isn't in the fantasy, it's in the ordinary. In breakfasts around the table. In late-night movies. In Jody sneaking ice cream with the girls when I'm not looking. In the quiet knowledge that I didn't just survive the storm. I walked out of it holding my daughter's hands, and I never looked back. Looking back now, I realized this wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was a lesson in rediscovery. Life, especially for those of us past the halfway mark, isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning how to stand through them. I learned that silence can be dangerous when it replaces honesty, and love doesn't survive on memories alone. It needs effort, respect, and truth. I also learned that losing someone who lied to you isn't really a loss. It's a rescue. To anyone in my shoes, especially those older and maybe feeling stuck, don't let fear keep you in a life that's breaking you. You're never too old to start again. You're never too late to reclaim your peace. If someone's taking advantage of your loyalty, it's not disloyalty to protect yourself, it's wisdom. Trust your instincts. Speak up. And don't let guilt chain you to someone who's already walked away in their heart. Life doesn't end with heartbreak. Sometimes it finally begins.